Ah, Julie, well done. Okay. Welcome to all the members. Thank you, Matt, Darryl Ray, Chris and Julie. Julie, we note, is sitting in for Councillor Bacon. Matt has to leave at some point. There's some other things to attend to, so when he gets up and goes, that you'll understand that he's attending some other matters. Let's get on. Apologies and changes in any membership. I'm not aware, other than Julie sitting in today for Councillor Bacon, of any changes. So that's it. Minutes as per the document supplied to you already. So we need to confirm, and as a true record, the minutes. I'll need a proposal. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Matt. So those in favour of accepting those minutes, thank you. That's you weren't here. That's right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's all right. Done. Yeah. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, Julie?
My interest.
Well, I'm just giving you an opportunity.
So just a local member for half of the harbour. That's Newport Harbour, just to clarify.
That's recorded. Public question time. Aware of any, there's no public here, but I'm not aware of we've had any public question time that we're aware of. No, that's no then. So we'll move on to the finance report for Newport Harbour, page 11 and 12 on our papers. Alex, you want to take care of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a standard item on the agenda. I think we're seeing a very similar pattern to what we saw at the last meeting. So unless there's any specific questions, I mean, the general overview on Newport Harbour is showing a net position, forecasted net position of a slight underspend. So in the good of 2,368. Similar patterns to last time in terms of the expenditure. The premises costs are forecasted to be above budget, mainly down to the rising cost of utilities, which is, I think, is what you were told at the previous meeting. So that hasn't changed. And it is good to see that actually, even in this current climate, Newport Harbour is actually in the good, if you like, which isn't the case in many income generating areas. So that's quite encouraging to see. I think the points on the income, similar patterns to last month. We've seen some very good figures continuing around leasing income as we review all the leases and licenses on the harbour. But we are still seeing some fairly disappointing figures around the kind of Folly Ventures areas. And I think certainly not the last meeting, because I wasn't here at the last meeting, but the meeting before that, we did discuss that at some length. And we were talking about, obviously, the current, well, at the time, the current position with the Folly, and that it wasn't as attractive as it had been in the past. As I understand it, that facility is reopened, and certainly his early comments are that it's very good. I would hope that that continues. Colleagues might want to comment on that, but I would hope that that would encourage people into that area, and that we can see some improvements in the incomes on those lines. Outside of that, it is much of a similar pattern as the early part of the year. We've obviously got through most of the busy part of the year now, and then we're heading into the quieter time towards the end of the financial year. But I think that's a fairly good position to be in for Newport Harbour, to be showing a surplus in the current environment, with all the additional expenditure and the pressures on income, etc. But happy to take any questions on that area, if anybody's got any.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions? Darryl?
Is this working?
Up.
I think I might be on. Yeah, just it was just more of a comment really on the folly itself, because obviously I work at one of the pubs just down the road from the folly, so we're quite well aware of what's been going on down there, and we know that they've been refurbed. From the estimates I've heard, is either a large six-figure sum or actually a seven-figure sum they spent on it. Brewery, so that's quite an investment. It's been open a couple of months so far, I think. Is there any sort of indication yet of any impact?
I'm happy to take comments that Sean and Jonathan might have, but there may have been a small impact, but probably we're more likely to see it as we get into the main part of the season. It's going to be, the yachting season, isn't it? Early next year. I don't know whether anybody else wants to comment on that. That's my general view.
As they open so late in the season, naturally the numbers drop off. It was like we were at sort of 200 visitors and now we've got 2. So it would happen the same with the folly. So until the season starts again, then we can see sort of once they actually start from April onwards, then we can see whether it's changed.
Thanks for that. Any other questions? A comment from me. It seems on our off-street parking income, we're continually under budget. Do we need to review what we estimate our income should be, or is there a reason for this? Small amounts of money, but
I think I'm right in saying that we make an allowance at certain periods in the year for the money that comes in through the permit income. So I'd have to check whether that's been included within the forecast accurately or not. A lot of the income down on the harbour estate is through permitted income, and it is quite difficult to make an allowance for that because obviously a lot of the permits cover the whole of the island. So we have a formula that we use to calculate that. But I think that's a point we can take away. That has actually come up. Julie might be maybe familiar with this from sitting on the user group meeting, because that does come up quite frequently on the user group meeting, because the users want to see that parking income is going back to the harbour. So yeah, it's quite an important point really, and making sure it's a fair contribution to the harbour as well.
you'll report back on that way. Thank you, Alex. Guy, if you can do that, or sure.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a much simpler budget. It's showing an overspend, forecasted overspend at the end of the year of about £5,000. Slight overspend on expenditure, mainly in the contracted services, which no doubt will be probably from the increase in cost of seaweed clearance. And in the income lines, around a slight reduction in berthing fees. And I think I'm right in saying Jonathan might be able to comment on this. That's as a result of the loss of some of the fishermen in that area. Yeah, I mean, we are talking quite small sums of money here. So you've only got, how many fishermen did we have? 4, 5? So obviously, if you lose one, you're going to end up with something in that kind of region. But it generally isn't forecasted to be too far away from budgeted figures, which I'm not happy about, but it's not a million miles away. So quite happy to take any questions. It is a very, very tight and small budget area, as you can see from the numbers.
Any questions? No questions. It's a long way away, Ventnor. Is there anything you ought to tell us about the seaweed, or is that for a later item on this agenda? Sorry, move on to the report. The senior harbourmaster. This is 15 and between pages 15 and 20 of our papers. Jonathan.
Thank you very much. As you can see, as I mentioned before, our overnight visitors have really dropped off from October. It's just because it's getting a bit cold and a bit wet, so no one wants to play with their boats. Through the quarter, obviously all of you were probably aware of the large water leak that Southern Water had by Bottomless Sea Close, which made it a little bit interesting. And if you're into vac tankers, you would have made a field day. We had hundreds of them. Other than that, the new safety management system has been released. That was done 1st of December, so we've got that updated and being done. The electric meters tariff have been updated to the current cost, which is now being done. So we are now getting paid what it costs us, which is always nice. We've had a couple of water leaks due to when it did freeze, but they were handled by staff and repaired. The major things we've had is due to the weather and the long periods of strong wind we've had. We have had 5 swing mooring boats that have had to be recovered. Some of them are due to our kit, and some of them were due to the vessel's kit failing. But a good majority of them are on the trot line that's being replaced next month. So we shouldn't have a problem once they're all shiny and new. Other than that, I'm quite happy to take any questions on anything. But we've been quite lucky, it's gone according to plan really in the last quarter.
It's encouraging, Jonathan. Right.
May I ask, what is the cost for the
35p per kilowatt hour.
How much is it costing us?
I think it costs us 34, so, which pays for the card that's on the meter. So.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Yeah, very good report and good.
Sorry.
Yeah, excellent report. And good to see no one's been chucking themselves in the harbour or no sort of near misses to report as we usually have one or two. Just about the hand crane, it might just be a typo, but it says it's been cleared up twice on the 12th of October. I'm guessing that's a typo, or is it particularly messy? You had to do it twice.
I'm afraid that's me playing with my copy and paste and got carried away, so my apologies.
All right.
Any other questions? Matt?
Thank you, Chairman. I might have already said this at the last meeting, I can't remember, but I just wanted to sort of thank particularly Jonathan for helping facilitate our day of Christmas through Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council. The event went really well and we utilised the quayside to what I think was great effect, and hope we can encourage more uses like that in the future. It's just nice to see people down there, and it was, even though it was cold, it was a really nice day as well, wasn't it? And it went very well. The whole of Newport was buzzing that day. So just a particular thank you on that.
There being no other questions, let's move on to Newport Ventnor Audit. So the Newport Audit, this is David, you, isn't it?
Yes. Let's take the Newport audit first. Last time I spoke, this time last year or thereabouts, remember the audit was fairly critical and a lot of outstanding actions were there to be done. I think the good news is that the vast majority of the things that we found have been put right in over the past year, which is, it's nice to start the new year with a bit of good news. So if I just go through the executive summary of my report there, just to remind you what's happened. I think the first thing that happened in May this year was we finally got the general directions done. So it gives the Harbour Board, you all, the powers to enforce much that you were doing before by a sleight of hand, because we hadn't got the powers behind us. Now we have. So that long haul of getting harbour revision order, general directions, and all the opposition and difficulties, the pain is finally over, and we're now beginning to reap the reward. Because that's been about 4 year. I think, Sean, 3 or 4 years you've been fighting, and I've been helping with it. So I think that's a really good news. I think the other thing is the fact of your own. You're the harbour board or the duty holders do hold these meetings properly, and you pay attention. I can mean there are many. How should I put this nicely? There are a number of municipal ports that maybe don't look at it as closely as you do, which actually helps a lot. Is getting that top-down interest. I think that one of the reasons why things have suddenly begun to moved on in leaps and bounds is we finally got through the new staffing. So you've now got 4 duty harbour masters who are doing the day-to-day running of the harbour, which releases the senior harbour master to get on to all that stuff that, if you remember, was not very good last time. And that's now really beginning to reap the rewards of that. So again, that is a great success. And again, once one goes to the office and things down there, it is. It has the air, it's buzzing, it's clean, it's tidy, and around the harbour itself is being really cleared up. It's actually excellent down there. I mean, I go to, as you know, hundreds, not hundreds, dozens of harbours a year, and down there now is looking really very smart, and it shows it's being loved, if you know what I mean. So I think that's good. Again, another piece of good news is the harbour users group. Remember, was sort of died down during COVID and was a bit slow in starting. Now that's running well again, and there's that passage of information up and down there. So I think that again is excellent. And we're back into the swing of things before COVID, which is excellent. I made a mention here about a thing called the Marine Safety Management Plan. This is. It's in the notes. What this is a list of things that you should hope to be done in the next 3 years. And again, in the past, when it said introduce general directions, etc., etc., that was a sort of overall management plan. Your plan runs out. I think about now, or maybe a couple of months' time, and then you need a new 3-monthly one. So imagine at the next meeting, you'll have that presented to see what you're planning to do in the next time. But I think some of the big ticket items now are done, which is very helpful. Again, this is in a way a little bit in the weeds, but your navigation risk assessment, which was something that didn't even exist a few years ago, has been reviewed. And all I'm recommending here is it again, one of the many things that fell behind during COVID was getting it reviewed, updated, and things have changed, in particular the Blade Runner and things like that. That now has been reviewed, and it's I'm saying here we now ought to make quite sure it's done once a year, and you should be told at least once a year what the top hazards are, which I think comes in your. Certainly, I seem to remember it came in your summer report, but I can't remember which one it was now. The other, sorry to use the word expression again, the other big ticket item was the safety management system overall, the paperwork running, how to run the harbour, all the details of it. That had fallen, if you remember, very badly behind, not pretty badly behind. That's now since the audit, it has now been completed and the new one is in force. So that was done, I think in September, October, you actually brought in, no, it was beginning of November, the new one is in. So that's in place. And again, it gives the team in the harbour office, something concrete, up to date against which to work. And that's good. The one thing that was very poor last time was the whole business, I think came massively to light to me. You may remember, and it wasn't in this period, it was previous film, a dredger went down the harbour, it was leaving the harbour, fog came down, and it got tangled up and bashed one of your moorings, one of your mooring pontoons. And then the way that was investigated, reported, etc., was not as it should be. and again, what you're supposed to do, you have an accident, you investigate it. Once it's been investigated, you should come up with recommendations. Those recommendations should feed back into your procedures, etc., etc. That's and then tell everybody what you've done. That circle wasn't happening. The new safety management system makes that much more clear. And of course, here you have an added complication, though it's not entirely different to a big commercial harbour, is one set of accidents and incidents are reported via the council system, and one set of accidents is reported via the national or the national, UK's instant investigation thing. So what this wasn't clear is, which system you should be using, how it should be done, how it should be reported. That again has been sorted out in the new safety management system. And the final thing is, of course, once you've done all this, you then tell your harbour user group, this is what happened, and this is what we've done about it. So again, you don't care. That now is written down as a thing, because beforehand, most of that was missed. Again, training and staff tracking is doing well. So that again is a considerable improvement. And of course, with more staff, it needs to be done better. And they have been trained. They've had training in the summer from me when the new staff joined. And I think there's one new member since then that I suppose we owe training to. Sorry, I'm just waiting. I think the emergency plans are there was a muddle about emergency plans. You have an oil spill. Where are the emergency plans? Where's the piece of paper that tells me what to do? And we found all that was lost. Well, not lost, difficult to find. Let's put it like that. Since then, that's been sorted out, and we've just recently got a new oil spill contingency plan in place. And I know that Sean has already made sure that all the old ones are got rid of, and the proper ones are available to the people who need to do things about it. So that has been sorted out. And along with that is in the summer, I can't remember the exact date, sorry, in March this year, or last year, I should say, that you've now signed a memorandum of understanding with Cowes, Yarmouth, Bembridge and yourselves to share equipment and expertise and manpower in the event of an oil spill. So again, you have a much better coverage there now than we had before. You must be, again, coming back to the harbour being tidy and things, you must have one of the best records of any of the ports I visit for getting rid of the old Ming, all those old boats that are sinking around the harbour. Your clearance there is better than I say most. Your approach to it, your success in doing it is good. So again, there are some ports that you can almost walk across the harbour with dead ships and boats and things, in little, particularly small harbours like this. But here you seem to have got stuff very nicely on top of that. I think the last thing is to do with the blade runner. As I think I explained to you when we talked about the Port Marine Safety Code, how the blade runner is a big boat comparatively to here, and when it goes through Cowes, it's subject to compulsory pilotage, and it has and they give them a port pilotage exemption certificate. When it goes over the border, as it passes the saloon bar of the Folly Inn, it suddenly goes into an area where we don't even supply pilotage. So we put into place by both general directions and then by, I forgot what it's called, your licensing system of licensing commercial operation, to add a few extra precautions for that vessel. That is all in place and was refreshed during the summer. So that's a good. I think that's the one thing we have to keep our eye on if the vessel is made longer, or there's a second one brought onto it, etc. But I've no idea whether vessels are going to have plans to move it on further. And I think the last thing is that, again, with the vessels, or anybody who's running a commercial operation has got to be very careful about how the team of people who are mooring the vessels are trained and things. But I know that Jonathan is organising to go to vessels to see this. But fortunately, you only have one commercial. Well, I say fortunately, unfortunately in a way, you only have one commercial berth running, the aggregate berth on the corner, whose name I can't remember. Yeah. That has ceased trading as a commercial boats going up and down. So you've only got the Blade Runner, and she comes in on the flood tide, loads, and is out on one tide. She doesn't touch the bottom or anything like that. So that is the Newport audit, sort of in a nutshell. I mean, I'm very happy to answer, before we move on to the other one, I'm very happy to answer any questions there are about this particular audit.
Thank you, David. Matt, I'll come to you, but it's sounding very positive. Great testament to you and to Jonathan and the team for implementing and sustaining some of these improvements. So we're mightily happy to hear words like we are better than many other ports. That's really encouraging to hear, David. Thank you. Matt.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I've been on this committee since it was started, and when you first started coming along, David, it looked like there was this big mountain to climb, and you know, and slowly but surely things have been chipped away and dealt with, and I think it is absolutely outstanding to see that we're in this position. And yeah, I think we do need to acknowledge the work of the team and everyone involved. It's you know, it's not in detriment to anything that's gone previously at the harbour. It's just a different harbour now. It does look different. It's tidier. We've got rid of some of the old vessels. I'm glad to see, I think all the buildings are in use, aren't they? I think every building's in use. You know, and it was nowhere near that when this committee started. So I think you know, while none of us here can take the credit for that, I think, you know, what's been done to bring it to that point is what this committee was formed for. And so hopefully we can see the same thing happen with Ventnor and whatever its future is, and we can make sure that things are maintained and it just gets better. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate that. Any other comments or questions about Newport? Right. Okay. Thank you, Dave. Would you like to bring us up to speed on Ventnor in the same way?
Yes, of course. Ventnor isn't the bundle of joy that we've just talked about. 2 years ago, when I did the audit there, and when we started looking at Ventnor and bringing it, thinking how do we bring it into the code, I did an audit there, and virtually, how do I put this nice? Almost nothing of the Port Marine Safety Code. There isn't a marine safety management system. There isn't a navigation risk assessment. There isn't a survey program, etc. There's virtually, and it's no good going through no, which it says in here.
Yes, it's David.
Funnily enough, let's take the positives there first. The legislation that was put in place when it was built is excellent. It gives you the powers of general direction. It's clear where the area is. So in other words, the foundation is there to build on. You haven't got to do a harbour revision order or anything like that. It's ready to rock and roll. But unfortunately, that rock and rolling hasn't started. And in truth, almost nothing has happened since then. I'm fully aware of that since then to put that right. However, when I did the audit, I made a list of all the things that needed to be done to bring it up, a get well plan. That get well plan, when I wrote it originally, was on the assumption that it was going to continue to be directly managed by the council, etc., etc. When I did the summer audit, I was asked by Sean, would I, rather than going all over there and just saying no all over again, just go back to my old audit and then said revision here. And it was revised, what's the word I want, with the view that another body was going to manage that harbour. That went out to contract. I mean, I don't want to get Sean to describe, but the invitation for tender, and somebody has now been allocated or has won the contract. Now, when they take over, they are starting almost a blank sheet of paper, other than the fact that they've got excellent legislation to start with. So currently, we do not the Ventnor does not comply with the Port Marine Safety Code. You are the duty holders for it, and we told the MCA that's the position we're in at present. We've now identified someone to take it over, and really I'd like to ask Sean to explain to you the details of that rather than me, because I get it secondhand. I think what I would like to say, sort of apropos both these things, I now talk to Sean and Jonathan once a month for about half an hour to 3/4 hour, and we have a catch up. So now there's a very good backwards and forwards. So a lot of this we've been discussing it keeps me up to date rather than just looking at it once a year. I'm looking at it actually once a month and talking to people in detail, and it's informal. We don't take minutes, so we can exchange the gore blimey type of remarks as well as the stuff. So I think where we are at present is we have a Ventnor does not comply. The management is just about to change, and currently the vast majority of the plan for the Get Well plan hasn't been carried out by either us or the newbies. And that's really, I think, Sean should explain where we go from here. It's about that I remain as DP, you remain as the duty holders.
Thank you, David. Any comments or questions? Julie, just on the basis that the next item is Ventnor Harbour and a verbal update, but sorry.
Which just goes, the obvious question is it a different operator that's taken over the harbour? And if it is, are we going to have faith in them to do what's required?
I think we're going to deal with that next, Julie, but a very pertinent question that was in my mind also. Report of Ventnor Harbour.
As long as we're going to get reassurance that this will be carried out, I think that's what's that's hanging, isn't it?
The next item is a verbal update, which really is including that. Shall we? Let's deal with it on the next item. Ray.
Based on what Julie says, what is our responsibility once the new person takes over? How much is the Isle of Wight Council responsible for that new incumbent to oversee that they put in the necessary risk management and everything else? Are we still liable, or is it solely on their shoulders?
We as the Isle of Wight Council would ultimately be liable. They are a contractor, or would be a contractor acting on our behalf. So it would be us to undertake the client role to ensure they're fulfilling their contractual obligations. But ultimately, if they failed to, that would revert back to ourselves as the authority. David would be retained as a designated person for Ventnor and would carry on those monitoring visits and would advise us and the contractor about their compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code.
And do we have the powers to interfere or not to intervene to make sure they are implemented if they are falling short of those responsibilities?
Yes, through the provisions of the contract.
Thanks, Ray. Julie.
Just following up on Ray's question, so will we as the accountable body, this committee, will we be given a timeline and milestones that will be reached, that have to be reached by the new contractor, or it could be the existing contractor? I don't know, because I think this is obviously something we need to monitor very carefully. If it is the same people and they haven't done it in the past, that's a bit of a red flag, isn't it?
Or we can bring reports back to the committee in terms of progress, in terms of mobilisation and performance in relation to the contract performance indicators.
Thank you, Sean. Just aware, because I guess we're the responsible body, aren't we? So we need to be aware of that, don't we? That's what I was thinking. It's pretty important, isn't it? Because it buck stops with us, doesn't it?
The answer is, I haven't read the contract exactly, but we remain the duty holder, or you remain the duty holder. I remain the designated person. What we've really got is somebody else who's actually doing the day-to-day running of the harbour and putting into place all those things. Just like you remember we had for getting Newtown back on track, I would imagine there's going to be a get well plan based on this list at the front, and I see no reason why you shouldn't here have a month at your quarterly meetings. One of the items is the Ventnor Get Well plan and progress against it. You have all the right, to my mind, unless I'm going to be kicked under the table by the lawyers, you have every right to demand that.
Should we hear what Sean's report is? It may answer many of the questions that we've got rather than.
Any further comments on that? Let's move on then to Sean's report on Ventnor Harbour. It's the last item on the agenda. We're doing very well. It's only just after 2:30. We can get you home by 3 if you're succinct. Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I will be succinct, definitely. As we advised, or as I advised at the last meeting, we were looking at a management contract for a 5-year period commencing on the 1st of April this year to the 31st of March 2028. The potential supplier will be expected to manage all aspects of the harbour at Ventnor, and that does include compliance with the Port Marine Safety Code. That was included in the specification. The specification detailed all the aspects of management of the harbour. It was very comprehensive. I can advise that 2 tenders were received and have duly been evaluated in accordance with the methodology set out in the tender documentation. And in consultation with the Cabinet member, it is proposed to approve the award of a 5-year management contract for all aspects of the operation of the harbour, with a contract commencing on the 1st of April 2023 this year. Details of supplier and the contract value will be made public after the decision is taken tomorrow. I welcome any questions.
Any questions, Matt?
Yeah, it's not a question. I think it's, you know, this obviously sort of potentially brings Ventnor into a slightly new era as well, doesn't it? And I would think that probably David will be making sure that when he attends these meetings, that he'll be highlighting any things, milestones that are being missed on the road to compliance. You know, and it's not going to be a quick road to compliance, is it? Based on how long it's taken for us to get Newport to this point. So, you know, I would think there'll probably have to be many discussions along the way. But during that 5-year period, we would expect to see full compliance in the Port Marine Safety Code reached, wouldn't we? I suppose probably the question I expect Julie was asking or going to ask is, do we have a view on when that should be reached? We had a view on that with Newport, didn't we? And we passed those dates quite, you know, many times for damn good reason as well. Don't get me wrong, but you know, and we've obviously, in some respects, we have to be understanding, surely, with Ventnor, where it's starting from a pretty disadvantaged position. So, what's your feelings on timescales, Sean?
It needs to be as soon as practically possible, which is what we said about Newport all the way through. I know that's something David would endorse, that we need to achieve it as soon as possible. Obviously, we've got 2.5 months between now and the beginning of April. We do have an opportunity to do some work to help that along in advance of them taking over the management of, not the ownership of. And that's something Jonathan can look at over the next 2.5 months. We've got all the suite of documentation which can be adapted for Ventnor. So hopefully we can actually do a lot of that legwork and actually hand over documentation, albeit in draft form, perhaps for review and not for sort of invention, in the case of reviewing it and agreeing it collectively. But certainly as part of that mobilisation, we'd want to agree a plan which sets out key a timeline and timescales for key parts of the code and prioritise that with them and with the help of David. So we've got something which is actionable and measurable that we can come back and report to this committee on.
Thanks, Sean. Chris, Matt, is it specific?
Yeah, just coming back on that. So if you don't mind, Chairman, so would you say then that actually it should help things along dramatically because of the journey we've had with Newport and the fact that a lot of the perhaps procedures and physical stuff on the ground that's needed to comply can be easily adopted from Newport's versions? Is that what you sort of mean, really?
Yeah, absolutely correct. Obviously, we learned a lot during that process. Jonathan put all the work in to get all the procedures in place. It's a smaller scale operation, so it's less onerous in terms of those policies and procedures. So it's more a slimmed down version of Newport, what we have in place there. So yes, it will definitely be of great assistance.
Chris.
Yeah, so laudable ideas, very good. And I like the idea of as soon as possible. But what I'd suggest is that for our next meeting, we ask for a plan to be brought back, which has, and I know our current document's got lots of nominal dates of the 31st of March on it, but that we have a proper plan with a Gantt chart that shows when each of those deliverables are expected to be met. You know, a proper plan to work to. I think having a proper plan sets expectations that people can be held to as well. So I like the as soon as possible. I'd like to see a lot more granularity on that, and how, it doesn't have to be very complex as a document. You know, a chart. You know, basically a calendar for the year, and here are the drop dates, and here are each of the deliverables which are due at each of those dates, and then that's something that this committee can review and mark against.
Yeah, point well made, Chris. Right.
Sean, in that process of the next 3 months, Jonathan preparing for the takeover, how much predicted costs will be involved to us to get it ready for the incumbent person taking over the contract? Is that in the budget? I'm sorry, I didn't read it fully. I should have done. If it is already in predicting cost for some of these health and safety issues that we need to get in place.
We'll carry on managing the harbour as we ordinarily do within the existing budget we've got. There are no set up costs that we would incur as an authority.
So it's all in there, basically.
Just
we're not predicting anything out of the ordinary.
No, just additional, probably more of Jonathan's time will be focused towards the handover, and less time on Newport, which is obviously the opposite of what has been going on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Darryl.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just coming back on the point Chris made, I think. Well, now we've, I mean, I joined this committee, we were sort of halfway through the process with Newport, and so I've seen the end. I didn't see the beginning, but from what you've all said, I can imagine. And what Ventnor looks like at the moment, I can imagine what Newport must look very similar. As you said, Sean, the documentation from Newport to a certain extent can be passed over to Ventnor. Obviously, it needs to be revised for the individual circumstance. Would that therefore suggest that the process for Ventnor should be quicker than it was for Newport because you're not starting from square one?
Absolutely. As you said, we were starting from a blank sheet of paper. David's first audit was almost a piece of work of art, it was like War and Peace. As I say, Newport, Ventnor is a smaller scale operation. The audit report, and we've actually put the action plan together, which Councillor Jarman's referred to, and obviously that is something we will use as the basis for reporting back to this committee in terms of the contractor's compliance with the code, with us monitoring and David auditing. But no, certainly anticipate it'll be a far quicker process. And as I've said, if Jonathan is able to put work in to that documentation in advance of the end of March, then it should be quicker still.
Thanks, Sean. Any further comments on that?
If I may suggest, as a mere consultant, is I think we ought to have a meeting with the contractor and sort out the sort of nitty gritty and the idea of a get well plan, which I think is absolutely right with the Gantt chart and things. But I think and the other thing I would like to do is to discuss with you or with Sean is whether we should include the Ventnor management, whoever it is, in our monthly liaison calls. So we, again, I'm got my finger on it. We've all got our finger on it again. So I'd like to see, if I may suggest, I think a kick-off meeting with the new contractor when we're a little bit further down, and then joining in with the and get them to join in with our monthly liaison call, so we can then see generally how it's all tootling along. And then we'll look at the timing of my annual audit. I did these ones in September. So by that, I would have thought, this is my David Foster's speaking, not having been primed, I would have thought if they had put their back into it, it could easily be ready to be audited in September with the vast majority of things in place, because all Jonathan's work and there's SMS, delete, Newport, insert, Ventnor works quite a lot all the way through it. So if they're given access to that to start with, which I think saves everybody time and effort, I would have thought there's not much to do. There's not as much there to do, anything like as much to do as there was when we started here doing Newport.
Thank you, Dave. So again, more encouraging words. We're very pleased to hear that, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to say in response to David's points, which are very well made, as part of our standard procurement processes, we will be having a contract startup meeting or a series of meetings if required with the contractor. And yes, you will be invited to that from the Port Marine Safety Code perspective.
I think just to clarify, that discussion would be after the contract's placed. It's that discussion, not to sort out whether a certain provider is going to be awarded the contract or not, be to discuss with the successful contractor details. Darryl.
It's just a quick question, and it may have been covered in our previous meeting that I was unwell for. The new contractor for Ventnor, will they be sending a representative to this meeting, or will we be going via Sean? As we currently have Jonathan here.
Good question, Darryl. So what's the view? This committee could make a decision about that if we wished. Maybe not with it being agendarised, but
I think, Chair, ordinarily we'd bring a contractor's report to the meeting, have a sort of quarterly report from them, an opportunity to discuss that with them and present it at the meeting. Just trying to think how that works with other contracts. Don't think that happens with something like the grounds maintenance contract. It's an officer report based on the contractor's report and monthly, bi-monthly or quarterly meetings, wherever are set up.
Maybe some comments, but Julie first, then Ray.
Yeah, I just feel perhaps bringing the contract here would be sort of stepping us into a more operational area, and I really think we need to, get the reports from all officers and they're the interface with the contractor. I think that's going a step too far in my mind across the boundary.
Okay, Ray.
Basically, I'll just reiterate what Julie's saying. I don't think it would be productive to bring the contractor to these meetings. It allows us to then discuss what we need to discuss and allow you guys then to do what you need to do. That's my view anyway.
And I think our officers are used to how we respond and work as a committee, whereas someone coming in from the cold may not quite get what goes on here as well. So,
Yeah, I'm happy with that too. I think I would want to reserve as a committee the right that were there a significant issue of variance that we could ask for the individual to appear in front of us to address specific issues. But I think in the first order of business, we would leave it through the normal administration chain to deal with that and take their advice as to when there was a need for the committee to directly intervene on that, if at all.
The point well made, Chris. It strikes me that we retain the statutory right and duty, statutory duty that we should oversee, and that becomes complicated through a third party, but we should retain that oversight, whatever that means, and we will. Any further comments? Last item is any members' question time. Questions. Time for Matt.
Thank you, Chairman. It's only something I've mentioned before, and hopefully one day we'll have some good enough weather that we can get our tour of the Harbour estate back in place, because I think it's really important actually, because there probably are members here that aren't aware of how vast the Harbour estate is and what effectively is being looked after. It's a huge area. It's pretty spectacular as well, and I think actually, sorry. I think all the way to Whippingham, Julie, is outstanding. Thank you. Well, Ventnor we could go to as well, can we? But I think Newport Harbour particularly actually seeing it and having a tour and being able to have things pointed out to us by Jonathan would be really, really important for where we go from here. Now Newport is pretty much compliant. We want to probably be looking past that now while we maintain compliance and looking at other elements of what this committee can be doing. So I think visiting the Harbour estate is really important sometime, maybe April, May times, perhaps.
Matt, thanks. And we did agree that, and I know that the administration of setting that up is the only thing that's defeated us thus far. Us all being available at a certain time on a cold January morning. I don't know whether we were all occupied elsewhere or felt it might be better in the spring. Matt, we will revisit it and make sure it happens. Thank you. Jonathan.
As a
I'll
lot
come
of
back,
you are
right.
here, would you prefer doing it in March or April? So I
Spring was
don't send
much
out
better in my
15
view.
dates. I can try April.
April the 1st.
April, and would you prefer it in the first week or the third week of April? And also the 2 bank holidays. Yeah.
It sounds good here, Jonathan, but as
I'll
soon
send
as
out
you
the ones in April. Sorry.
sounds good. As soon as you start putting diary requests round, it grinds to a halt. But well, we will do our best, and let's go for a majority of members. If 1 or 2 of us can't make it, let's just go ahead. Ray.
It's probably a ridiculous question, but going back to Newport Audit, could you just clarify the Blade Runner? When it comes through CALS, they get a dispensation that they pilot it themselves. Is that correct, isn't it? And then when they get to the folly, that changes. Are we just piggybacking that same rule into Newport, or is the risk factor changed? Because at the folly, there is a lot more small ships floating around, isn't there? Small crafts. Just sorry if it's a question.
No. The answer to that question is, sorry, the answer to the question for that is that we are not a competent harbour authority. That's nothing to do with competent as being, competent harbour authority is one which supplies pilotage. So we don't have the powers or anything in force in fact, and again, part of the journey to where we are now was how we avoided becoming a competent harbour authority for dealing with one vessel only in the, I always want to say southern, the northern part, that short northern part from where you pass the saloon bar of the folly till you get to the of course the investors. So if you are a competent harbour authority, you would set down pilotage is required for this type of vessel. So let's say it is 70 meters long and not and all passenger vessels, etc. So you come up with a set of rules, etc., etc. And for those vessels that come under the requiring pilotage, the competent harbour authority then has to supply a pilot on board that vessel when it goes in and out of harbour. Clearly, if you think about the red funnel ferries going in and out, that's you don't want a pilot on those; they learn themselves. So after a series of training trips and an exam, the masters of the red ferries and any others that they can apply then get a thing called a pilotage exemption certificate. The Blade Runner, currently, all the masters of the Blade Runner all have cows exemption certificates. So one of the things that you require, additional things, is that the vessels that come up into your area hold a PEC. So you asked about piggybacking. The answer to that question is you are in a way piggybacking. It's one of the number of things you test. You already independently check their medicals and their certification. So the answer is yes, we are in a way piggybacking on cows. One of the things we looked at and asked, though I think with the change of management there, and if we become worried about it, is to ask cows, would they be willing to extend their competent harbour authority into your area just for pilotage, which is an awkward but not an impossible thing to happen. For instance, in the Solent, there are a number of overlapping competent harbour authority areas. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with doing it. The answer to your question is we've got in place a system which sort of, I'm going to say paper over the cracks. That's not quite the right word. We've done enough to currently to get around there. You said up here is busier, but I think taking the Blade Runner through cows during Cows Week, nothing is worse than, I'm speaking as a person who's done it both sitting on the boat and the yacht, and nothing is worse than that. So down here is no more demanding than the worst days up in Cows. So I don't think, but it does get a little bit narrower, but where she turns off is quite wide. And the good news is, as I said, she comes in on the tail end of the flood, loads up and goes out on the ebb. So she doesn't touch the bottom, and it is when the harbour is at its widest and deepest. So we looked at that in your navigation risk assessment. It's there, and one of the mitigation measures that's shown in it is the fact that you've got the commercial vessel operating license, which you've given.
So we are legally.
Yes, we can show. Legal is correct is the wrong thing. We have looked at it and we have come up with what we think is an appropriate risk assessment, appropriate mitigation measures at present. That's why I said to you, where the vessel will be lengthened, where they start handling longer still things, we might have to look at it again. I think what you do get free of charge is the cows also escorts the vessel through their waters, and that escort now stays with them all the way up to the berth. So you are actually getting it. We are free with every trip up. You get a little bit of cows covering harbour master vessels helping.
At the request of investors, because they don't want anything crashing. The garden.
Thank you for that, David. Any further questions, queries, comments from anyone? Therefore, it's 3 o'clock. It's 1 hour. We did very well, and I want to thank you all for helping us do that. Thank you, as always, David, for your input.